The planet Lycaris was harsh, unforgiving, and ruled by strength. Its dense forests stretched for miles, tangled with enormous roots and sharp rocks that could tear flesh if one was careless. High above, the twin moons glimmered coldly, casting pale light over the jagged landscape. The pack's territory lay in the heart of this wilderness, where the Alpha King Kyle led his warriors with an iron paw. Kyle was a figure of awe. Tall, muscular, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, he commanded respect through presence alone. Every Alpha in Lycaris envied his strength, and every Omega feared him or ignored him. Omegas were soft in comparison, fragile in appearance, and often cast aside as weak. Among them was Lyra, a small, rejected Omega who had never truly belonged anywhere. Lyra had grown up on the outskirts of the pack's stronghold, shunned by most and underestimated by all. Her body was slight, her fur dull compared to the shining coats of the Alphas, but her mind was sharp. She could read the forest like a map, sense danger before it arrived, and move silently enough to make the shadows envious. Still, her status meant no one ever saw her as anything more than a burden. On this night, the wind carried whispers of trouble. Lyra crouched atop a rocky outcrop, her eyes scanning the distance. She had been hunting small creatures to survive as usual when she heard it. The echo of hurried steps, a low growl, and the unmistakable voice of Kyle calling commands. Her heart pounded. Being near the Alpha was dangerous, but curiosity pulled her closer. She slid silently between trees, careful to avoid broken branches that could betray her presence. The closer she got, the clearer the scene became. Kale was surrounded. A group of rogue pack members, wolves who had once sworn loyalty, now lunged at him with sharpened claws and predatory eyes. Kale fought fiercely, but he was injured. Flood stained his fur as he parried and struck, yet more enemies kept coming. Lyra froze. She knew what would happen if she revealed herself. Omegas were considered inferior, and Kale, proud and powerful, could sense the scent of fear and weakness. If he knew she was there, he might reject her completely, or worse. But her instincts refused to let him die. Her mind raced, devising a plan. She crept closer, staying hidden behind a cluster of thick roots. She noticed the rogue pack had underestimated the terrain. Loose rocks and thin branches could be used to their advantage. Lyra began shifting small obstacles, causing branches to snap and rocks to fall. One rogue stepped on a hidden root, tripped, and collided with another. Kale growled, using the distraction to tear through an enemy's flank. But he remained exhausted and surrounded. Lyra's heart raced. Each movement had to be precise. One mistake and the rogues would find her. She spotted a narrow ravine nearby and realized she could manipulate it to create chaos. Snapping a large branch, she pushed it to block part of the path. Another rogue stumbled into it and fell, letting out a yelp of surprise. Kale's eyes flickered toward the sound, but he didn't see her. Minute by minute, she orchestrated small victories. A loose rock sent one attacker sliding down a slope. A tangled root ensnared another. Kale, still fighting, had no idea that an unseen Omega was turning the battle in his favor. Lyra felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. Every second counted, and she could feel the Alpha's life hanging by a thread. Finally, Kale found a moment of clarity. With a powerful roar, he threw back the closest attackers and limped toward the ravine. The rogues were disoriented, giving him just enough time to escape the immediate danger. Lyra exhaled softly, blending into the shadows, but she didn't move from her spot yet. She needed to be sure he was safe. Kale disappeared from her sight, limping toward the safety of the inner forest. The rogues were regrouping, confused and angry at their failed ambush. Lyra knew this was only the beginning. The rogue faction wouldn't give up so easily. But for now, she allowed herself a small sense of triumph. She had saved the Alpha King without him ever knowing. As she retreated, she noticed the forest around her trembling. The tension of the night left the air heavy, and even the leaves seemed to whisper warnings. Lyra had grown up in this wilderness, but tonight every shadow felt different. She knew Kale would survive, but only barely. And if she wanted to continue protecting him, she would have to be cleverer than ever before. Lyra returned to her hiding place, a hollowed tree near a cliff's edge, and examined her scratches and bruises. None of them mattered compared to the realization that she had done something extraordinary. She, a rejected Omega, had outsmarted and protected the most powerful Alpha in Lycaris. The thought made her chest swell, yet fear lingered. If Kale discovered her presence, what would happen? Meanwhile, Kale reached the inner sanctum of the pack. His warriors looked at him with a mix of awe and confusion. "Alpha, you returned," one said cautiously. Kale's eyes scanned the faces of his pack, distrust lingering in his gaze. Something had gone wrong tonight. He could feel it in his bones. Kyle's thoughts kept returning to the ambush. He had fought with all his strength, yet it had been too close. How had he survived? A nagging suspicion tugged at him. Something about the battle didn't add up. His instincts told him that someone or something had shifted the odds in his favor. But who? He didn't notice the small, fleeting shadows flitting in the forest, or the faint glimmer of clever eyes watching from a distance. Hours later, as the forest settled and the twin moons cast silvery light over Lycaris, Lyra finally allowed herself to shift slightly, revealing a sliver of her true form. Her fur shimmered faintly in the moonlight, her body agile and ready. She didn't shift fully. If Kale smelled her now, he might reject her immediately. She stayed hidden, knowing that patience and caution were as important as courage. The night was quiet, but danger was far from gone. The rogue faction would regroup, and Kale would need help he didn't know he had. Lyra's mind buzzed with possibilities. She could save him again, guide him, and perhaps even teach him that true strength was not only in muscle or dominance but in intelligence, loyalty, and courage. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt that she mattered, not to the pack, not to society, but in a way that counted. She had changed the fate of the Alpha King. And though Kale would never know it tonight, her presence had begun to reshape the future of the pack. Lyra remained in the shadows until dawn, watching as Kale's figure disappeared deeper into the forest, wounded but alive. A quiet determination settled over her. She would not be a silent observer again. The rejected Omega had found her purpose, and it was far greater than mere survival. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the first rays of sunlight touched Lycaris. A new day was beginning, a day where alliances would shift, power would be tested, and a clever Omega might just change everything for the Alpha King and the pack he ruled. The forest of Lycaris was quiet in the early morning, but the calm was deceptive. Kale, the Alpha King, had survived the ambush, yet he was aware that danger still lurked in every shadow. His body ached from the battle, but his mind raced faster than ever. Something or someone had turned the tide in his favor, yet no one in his immediate pack had the skill or courage to do so. Meanwhile, Lyra watched from a distance. She had followed Kale as he retreated deeper into the forest, noting the weaknesses in his pack's defenses. Her mind worked quickly, planning the next moves. The rogue faction that had tried to kill him would strike again, and she knew the Alpha could not survive without help. Yet she could not reveal herself fully, not yet. Kale would smell her Omega scent and, despite her actions, might reject her entirely. The rogue faction gathered on the outskirts of the forest. Their leader, a massive Alpha named Varen, sneered at the thought of Kale escaping them. "He cannot hide forever," Varen growled. "We will crush him and take the throne. No Omega can stop us." Lyra's ears twitched. She realized that brute force alone would not defeat them. Strategy and cunning were her weapons, and she intended to use them. Silently, she crept closer, observing the rogues' positions. She noticed the terrain favored a clever defender. Narrow cliffs, unstable rocks, and dense brush that could conceal her movements. Using her knowledge of the forest, Lyra set traps. Thin branches were snapped to fall when tripped. Rocks were balanced to tumble at precise moments, and small pitfalls were camouflaged with leaves. Every action was calculated. She wasn't strong like Kale, but her intelligence gave her an advantage. Kale, unaware of her presence, moved cautiously through the trees. He kept his senses alert, listening for any hint of the rogue faction. Despite his injuries, he remained the embodiment of Alpha strength, confident, cautious, and unyielding. He suspected that someone had helped him before, but could not determine who. His pride would not allow him to admit he needed assistance, yet instinct told him to remain alert. As the rogue faction advanced, Lyra acted. She triggered a falling rock that blocked a narrow pass, forcing several attackers to collide. Branches snapped above, sending others tumbling into hidden pits. Confusion spread among the rogues, giving Kale the opportunity to gain higher ground. He paused, noticing the chaos, yet could not understand the cause. Then he saw a shadow dart across the trees, quick, deliberate, almost like a ghost. Kale's instincts told him it was an Omega, but he could not smell her. Curiosity mixed with caution. He followed the movements. realizing that whoever it was manipulating the battlefield to his advantage. Lyra led Kyle through a series of clever maneuvers, drawing the rogues into traps she had set. Rocks fell at precise moments. Brush concealed sudden drops, and narrow paths forced the attackers into small groups where Kale's strength dominated. The Alpha moved with renewed energy, sensing an unseen ally guiding him, though he did not yet see her. At one point, Kale was cornered near a cliff. Varen approached, snarling, thinking victory was certain. Lyra acted quickly, dislodging a large boulder above the rogue leader. Varen barely avoided it, stumbling backward into Kale's waiting strike. The Alpha's claws struck true, sending Varen sprawling. Kale realized that the tide of battle had shifted, yet he still did not understand why. Finally, when the rogue faction was in full retreat, Kale turned to face the forest. His eyes scanned every shadow, every movement. Then he saw her. Lyra stepped into the moonlight, her Omega form revealed for the first time. Her fur shimmered faintly and her eyes gleamed with intelligence and courage. Kale's breath caught. He had expected an Alpha warrior, a familiar force of strength, but not this. A small rejected Omega stood before him, calm and unafraid. She had guided him, protected him, and outsmarted his enemies. His mind struggled to process it. "You did this?" he asked, his voice a mixture of surprise and disbelief. Lyra nodded. "I couldn't let you die," she said simply. "I used the forest, the traps, and the terrain. You didn't see me and I didn't shift. I knew if you smelled me it could ruin everything." Kyle studied her, noting the determination in her posture, the sharpness in her eyes. For the first time he realized that strength was not only measured by muscle or dominance. Intelligence, courage, and loyalty were just as powerful, even in someone society had labeled weak. "You saved me," Kale said finally, his tone softer than usual. There was no pride, no arrogance, only acknowledgement. Lyra's presence had altered the outcome of the battle, and he understood it. Lyra's ears flicked, sensing the tension in Kale's voice. She didn't speak of status or power. She simply said, "We are stronger together than apart." "You need help, Alpha, even if you don't admit it." Kale's gaze softened. The forest around them seemed to recognize the shift in power, not through dominance but through unity. He extended a claw toward Lyra, a gesture of trust. "Then stay with me," he said. "Help me lead the pack." A flicker of surprise passed through Lyra. This was more than she had expected. She had only wanted to save him, to prove that she mattered. Yet now Kale, the Alpha King, was asking for her alliance, acknowledging her worth. The rogue faction, meanwhile, retreated into the dense forest, nursing their wounds and planning their next move. They would not forget this night, but they would remember that even the strongest Alpha could be saved by someone they underestimated. Kyle and Lyra returned to the inner sanctum of the pack together. His warriors looked at the small Omega with a mix of astonishment and newfound respect. Kale, once proud and solitary, now walked with an ally who had proven that courage came in many forms. Lyra's presence changed the atmosphere. Omegas who had long been ignored began to feel hope. Kyle noticed it too, understanding that his pack could be stronger if he valued every member, not just the strongest. Lyra, though still small in size, had the mind of a strategist, the heart of a protector, and the courage of a true warrior. Days passed, and the pack slowly recovered from the ambush. Kale trained with renewed vigor, now supported by Lyra's guidance and insight. Together, they devised strategies, prepared defenses, and even began to rebuild trust among the more uncertain members of the pack. Lyra's intelligence and careful planning prevented further disasters, proving that her value went far beyond her Omega status. At night, Kale would sometimes watch her from a distance, marveling at her abilities. Lyra, ever modest, never sought recognition. She worked silently, efficiently, and wisely. Yet the Alpha King knew that the pack would never be the same. Strength had many faces, and the rejected Omega had shown him the greatest form of all: loyalty, courage, and cleverness in the face of danger. One evening, as the twin moons cast silver light over Licorice, Kale approached Lyra. "You've changed the pack." "And me," he said quietly. "I underestimated you. I see now that strength is not just what we show, it is what we protect and how we think." Lyra blinked, humbled. "I only did what I had to do." "You would have died without someone thinking ahead." Kale nodded, understanding. The rogue faction would return someday, but they would not win. Not while he and Lyra worked together. The Alpha and the rejected Omega had formed an unspoken bond, built on trust, courage, and respect. The pack could feel it even if they did not yet understand its full significance. As dawn approached, Lyra and Kale stood together, surveying the forest. Danger still existed, challenges were ahead, but for the first time both of them knew they were no longer alone. The rejected Omega had become the unseen hand that guided the Alpha King, proving that the smallest and most overlooked could hold the fate of an entire pack in their hands. And so, Lycoris began to change, not through force or fear, but through courage, intelligence, and the quiet strength of a rejected Omega, who refused to remain invisible.